Hello and welcome to the City of Games. My name's Frank, and today we are going to be talking about the Emberling naming day. Now, this is a really interesting small part of the lore from the City of Kings universe, and it's something that I wanted to share because as a designer, when I'm creating games, some games have lots of narrative built into them, and some games have far less. A game like Emberling, for example, it has a introduction, a setting, it tells you what's going on in the world within that game, but the game itself doesn't have any further additions to that story. You're not playing through a narrative as such. You are moving around, and it's, for want of a better word, quite a dry experience. It's up to you to kind of build some of that narrative because it is not a story-driven game. But that doesn't mean that story and narrative doesn't exist. It just means that it's hidden in places you may not expect. And one of those places for Emberling is in the names of the characters. You see, when I create new races or have new creatures that you discover, I often give them names and kind of define a set of rules around what those names are going to be like, so that each type of creature or different race that you encounter has a different type of naming convention based on their backgrounds, based on where they're from within the world, and based on a whole number of different factors. But you don't really tend to see it so much because there's only one or two characters from each race that have really been out in the world for the most part. But with the Emberlings, there's nearly 100 characters, and this means that the naming systems become far more kind of noticed. You see a lot more characters, a lot more names, and that within itself tells a story that I would like to talk about today. So let's get to the table, strangely enough, and I want to walk you through how naming day works for the Emberlings, because there is no greater day for those who choose to take that path. When an Emberling is born, they start as a leaf dweller, and every Emberling starts as a leaf dweller. That is just the way that things are. And you're given a name by your parents, just much like you and I. They choose a name, generally at birth or very soon after birth. But for the Emberlings, these names they're not seen as your long-term name like they could be, but they're generally seen as kind of a playful, kind of simple name that describes who you are. Perhaps it's something to do with your characteristic that you were born with, a behavior you exhibit in the first few days, such as Bubbles, who just enjoyed blowing bubbles, and Hops, who only has one leg and had to hop around, and Twitch, who was born with this weird, nervous little twitch that no one really understood. Now Twitch is older, he's become a believer in the powers of Vesh, and perhaps there was some sort of curse or darkness that caused those twitching habits, but that is how he got his name. You see, these names are characteristic, but they might also just be based on nature. And you'll notice that there's a bit of a trend. Whilst the male characters generally have something that's a bit more specific to their character, the female characters often a bit more nature kind of driven. And that doesn't mean that you won't have characteristic-based female names or you won't have nature-based male names. But that just tends to be the preferences of the parents when their children are born. And one of the things with being a leaf dweller is that you start as a leaf dweller, but you can remain a leaf dweller for your entire life. Maple here has just chosen the path. She wants to create her perfumes and just live her life. Leaf dwellers are generally people, as they get older, who want to just live a simple life. They want to just have simple jobs and hobbies, whether they're painters or explorers or gatherers, people who just want to not go too far and not push to achieve greatness, but just to enjoy their life. But at some point, they might choose a path. And There's no age, there's no specific, it's not like you turn to an adult and you have to choose a path or anything like that. Taking a name and choosing a path for an Emberling is very much a personal decision, and often it is a calling. Sometimes it can be something that you aim for, like the Leaf Shaper. Sometimes it's something that you're born for, like the Leaf Warden, or perhaps the Leaf Bound, where there's just something inside that sets you in that direction. Let's take a look at these different paths. Now, the Leaf Shapers, these are the rulers, the powerful, rich Emberlings. To become a Leaf Shaper, you can't just choose to be a Leaf Shaper. You have to prove yourself. You have to earn it. There's nothing grander than reaching a point in life where you can become a Leaf Shaper. And when you choose to become a Leaf Shaper, you'll change your name. And these names are generally very refined names. They're grander names. They're not the fun and playful dweller names that you're born with, but these are often somewhat musical and sophisticated. You'll notice at the top here, these are the kind of suffixes, the endings of names for each of the different types. So if you choose to become a Leaf Shaper, if you're a male, then the end of your name generally is going to be like an eon or an orn or a real, something that just allows your name, like Thalion, something that just sounds mighty and grand, Jorian, the powerful, the rich, the successful. And for the females, we have Ia and Rhea and Ara, Galara, Amara, names that just, they kind of sound sophisticated and just give you that sense of elegance. For the Leaf Shapers are those who have reached the top of the past. I talked about that calling. The calling to become a Leaf Bound is almost religious. It's a spiritual, kind of mystical kind of feeling inside, because the Leaf Bound, they are the people who believe in the powers of the Ember Leaf, the leaf that brought life to all of the Emberlings. The Leaf Bound are people who worship the leaf, and generally there are two different directions this can go. There's the more serene kind of route where they're true like believers, they're peaceful, they want to just look at the ways and understand, they want to spread the joy and happiness, they want you to understand that the leaf is good and we should protect it, and it is mighty and wonderful. And these names are generally a little bit kind of softer, but still kind of like mystical to an extent. So these names will end with like L for the males and kind of owl for the females. So here we've got Borrel and we've got Cereal. They're kind of names that just give that peaceful but kind of spiritual feeling to some extent. But the other type of Leaf Bound, I don't want to say that they are evil, because I think evil has a presumed definition that isn't correct in this sense. But these kind of ritualistic Leaf Bound beings, they believe in the power of the leaf. They're less interested in the protection of the leaf. They're less interested in kind of spreading the good nature and talking about where it comes from. They're more interested in how can we use this to achieve greatness, whether that is furthering themselves or making the Emberlings themselves more powerful. But generally you'll see that these characters, their names are a little bit harsher sounding, but still in that same kind of essence as the more serene Leaf-bound characters. So here we've got Corrin and Selenak. Selenak is kind of, it's almost like a wizard or kind of like a dark kind of arts master. And you can see here that Selenak has got the book that's studying with the hand of Vesh on it. Because these characters aren't just leaf-bound. They're not just believers in the leaf, but they're believers in magic and power. And as I say, they're not necessarily evil, but they're not quite as kind-hearted and as kind of open as the more serene Leafbound characters. Finally, let's take a look at the Leaf Wardens. And the Leaf Warden path is the fighter path, the defenders of the people who want to be protectors. They want to be strong or cunning or clever, but their names are generally more harsh, more direct. They don't have the elegance. They don't have that kind of ritualistic or spiritual kind of feel to them. They're more just sharp. We're going to see like Brack. We're going to say Zor. These names are names that kind of just generally end with harsher kind of terms, just to really emphasize that strength. And with our female Leaf Wardens, these characters generally, again, can have those harsher names, but they like to kind of have a like slightly more friendly, but still harsher kind of sound to them. So we've got Zinra and we've got Myra. Characters that are just bringing this kind of sense of power and strength to their names, but still keeping their own identity. So what you're going to find as you discover and explore more characters within the Emberling universe is that these characters' names are going to tell you more than just what they're called. They're going to tell you the life that they've chosen to take. They're going to tell you whether they are rich and successful, whether they're a believer in the Leaf, whether they're a defender and protector of the people, or whether they just want to have a good life and be playful and fun. As I say, any Emberling can choose to have their naming day at any point, assuming that they've chosen a path and show the right signs to move in that direction. And there's nothing wrong with not taking a path. And finally, I do want to mention that the Leaf Dweller traditions are always a little bit kind of here and there. There's no specifics to what your name has to be or the rules that it should follow. So you may find that some Leaf Dwellers, their names may clash or interact with the Leaf Shapers, the Leaf Bound, or the Leaf Wardens, because their parents are perhaps trying to push an identity upon them. Perhaps they're trying to set a path and giving them a calling. Doesn't always work, but sometimes perhaps it does. Anyway, that is the story of the Emberlings naming day, telling you about how they get their name and why they get their name. I hope you found this interesting, and if you've got any questions at all, please feel free to ask them in the comments below. And until next time, keep on adventuring.